Good morning, everyone. We will start in about a minute on time. Okay, I will start because we want to finish on time. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tuğçe. I'm one of the project managers of CCRI-CSO, Circular Cities and Regions Coordination and Support Office. Today, I would like to welcome you all to this third webinar organized by the CSO, which is focusing on monitoring the circular transition to circular economy. Outcomes or maybe even impacts of the policies we put in place, and of course the challenges that come with such an ambitious exercise. We have a packed agenda today. I see people still coming in. We added 15 minutes to the end. I hope this is okay for everyone, but we really wanted to have some room for a Q&A session if we manage to do so. So I'm hoping we will be able to finish on time and have your questions or comments, at least some of them. Sorry, today's agenda is split into 3 sections. First, we look at the more conceptual theoretical underpinnings of what is monitoring frameworks. And then we will turn to CCRI methodology. It has some advice for us on how to do such an exercise. And then we will give you a quick presentation of a self-assessment tool, which is being developed by the CSO at the moment. At the last section, we'll take the debate to the real life. We will hear from 5 different territories across Europe. They will each share with us their experience about monitoring and how they managed to put a system in place, and of course their challenges. I would like to thank all of the guest speakers for their generous contribution to this webinar, and I think it will be useful to hear from them for all of us. The question, so they each have their own specificities. I will mention them when their turn comes. With this, we hope to give you different dimensions of the same topic, really. How do we know whether our policies are working? How do we have even data on its basic components like material flows or waste flows? And from that, how do we arrive to a bigger picture like sustainable development goals or climate footprint of a territory? Before we start, as you all know, a couple of housekeeping rules. Your microphones and cameras are off, so don't raise your hand. Please use the chat function to provide comments or questions. This is important for us, so you can provide your ideas, your opinion anytime through the chat. We might not be answered to all of them today, but we will take them into account. We will go over them and we will read them. So it's valuable to us. Please do not hesitate to do so. In case of technical problems, you can write on the chat, or you can send an email to the address you will see in the chat or on the slide in a minute. The meeting will be recorded and it will be made public as for all webinars of the CCRI-CSO. So if you want to stay anonymous, please refrain from using the chat. One last thing, we will pin on a poll question to the chat, and it will stay there for the entire session. This is for our self-assessment tool, so you can answer that anytime. It will stay there. With this, I would like to give the floor to my colleague Yannis, who will set the scene for us and provide us an introduction to this topic of monitoring the circular economy transition. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Tuğçe. So my name is Yannis. I'm Yannis Lambert. I'm project manager at the CCRI-CSO, and I've been working on the self-assessment tool together with my colleague Tim, who will present a quick introduction on it later on. I'm now happy to give you a short introduction to the topic of our today's webinar, which is about monitoring circular economy. And well, to be clear, dealing with circular economy monitoring is a complex task, a challenging task, sometimes even tedious. And well, if you start with it, it may feel like a maze. It is often difficult to find a starting point and a way forward. Everyone has to find a suitable way for him or herself to go through. Well, why is this the case? Next slide, please. Circular economy is a complex idea. It relates to many big topics such as resources, waste, energy, climate change, even, well, industrial or economic development or social factors. And to capture this variety, various concepts have been developed. For example, you all know the famous butterfly diagram developed by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which looks at the biological resource cycle on the one side and the technical cycle at the other. Then there are, for example, the various R strategy concepts ranging from only 3 Rs, which would be reduce, reuse, recycle, up to 9 Rs or even 10 Rs. And then, well, there are other frameworks such as the more business-oriented Resolve framework. And I'm sure there are many other frameworks as well. And I see that the screen is, I hope this applies not to everyone. Well, the diversity of this is reflected in a diversity of metrics as well. In contrast, for example, to climate change, where you have one key metric such as CO2 emissions that everyone understands and is rather clear, comparably clear to measure. There's a lack of such a single metrics for circular economy. Some may think of recycling, the recycling rate, but it is clear that circular economy goes beyond that, and that there are also limitations to this indicator of recycling. And apart from the lack of such a single indicator, there's not even a single framework or indicator set that can be applied. At the level of the European Union, for example, you have the EU monitoring system, which takes a look at 10 indicators across 4 different dimensions, which is fine, but it's a very aggregated look at it. Then you have on the national level examples, for example, from the Netherlands or France, which are quite famous, but there are also many other national monitoring schemes. And then, of course, at the local level, you have a variety of approaches. One rather well-known example is the Circular Economy Monitor of the City of Amsterdam, which is rather advanced, but there are many other approaches to this. And today we will hear a couple of interesting approaches from various cities. To get an overview over this situation, the OECD has conducted a study on circular economy indicators used, and the results of this are quite interesting. If you go to the next slide, please. They looked at 29 different monitoring systems at the local level, but also on overarching levels. And among these only 29 schemes, they found that more than 474 different circular economy indicators are being used. And well, they relate this to a lack of an agreed definition. And they found that even if similar concepts or similar indicators are looked at, there's a strong variety in the way they are composed or calculated. Topic-wise, they note that there's a strong emphasis placed on indicators on waste, on recycling and resource efficiencies, which is fine because, of course, those are core pillars of circular economy. But other important aspects are neglected, such as sharing, design, or product use, for example. Generally, they criticize that the monitoring approaches that they found are mostly data-driven rather than objective-driven. So that means that everyone makes use of the data that is there and that one has, instead of looking at the real needs of measurement. And finally, they see a lack of systemic or systematic approach to the issue of monitoring. So what does this mean? If we go to the next slide, please. Let's take a rather quick dive into some theory. What we see here is called theory of change or intervention logic. And it distinguishes several different elements that are part of any action taken on circular economy, and that ideally should be considered separately. So first, there's the baseline or status quo situation. What is the situation at the beginning? What is the context in which an action is taking place? Then next, one can look at the implementation of actions itself. Here, you can look at which specific steps have been undertaken and to what extent has an action been completed or not. Then, going further, there are direct results, also referred to as outputs. So, for example, the number of participants you have reached in an event, or the number of stakeholders you have reached with awareness campaign, for example. Then, going further, there are outcomes, so rather more long-lasting, more aggregate effects of the actions. So if you, for example, look at an awareness campaign that you made on avoiding single-use plastics, then you can, for example, make a survey to find out whether the public has become more knowledgeable about the subject than before. This would be an outcome. Finally, there's the dimension of impacts. So the question if there's been a noticeable effect on the overall goals, such as reducing the use of resources or the amount of waste. In our example, that would be tangible effects of the awareness campaign in the the amount of single-use plastic sold, or the amount that is found in local waste streams. Of course, in practice, these elements are often difficult to distinguish, and usually it's very hard to establish these causal links between these elements because there are many interfering side effects. But still, it is important to be aware that there are different dimensions of assessment that should be considered, and that should be distinguished when you conduct a monitoring scheme. Just one last word on terminology here. In the strict sense, monitoring would refer only to the first two elements, so to check if actions have been implemented. And then going further, looking at results would rather be called an assessment or an evaluation in the strict scientific sense. But in practice, these terms are usually mixed. Next slide, please. So let's get back to practice again. Why should one make this effort? Why bother? Why should you invest energy and resources in setting up a monitoring system? I will give you 4 good reasons for this. First, a monitoring system will lead to better decisions. You can make informed choices on which actions to take. So in the end, on how you invest your time and your resources. Second, it will enable you to better steer the process of implementing actions. It will make it possible to fine-tune or adjust things on the way. And third, it will help you to achieve a better outreach and communication to stakeholders, be it local stakeholders or even attracting attention outside the region. And also tangible results will help to make convincing arguments to receive funding or any external support. And last but not least, a regular monitoring will help you to achieve better results on the actual cost. So it will show you if you really improve in circular economy, and also point out areas where more attention is needed. To sum up, on the next slide, please. Circular economy, it's clear, it's a complex concept and it requires specific actions tailored to your context. And equally, this requires then a tailored monitoring approach. There's no gold standard, no indicator set that you could just take and apply. And while the OECD criticizes that many approaches are data-driven, I would say this is more than fine to start with. Of course, you have to look for what information you actually have or can retrieve, what you actually can measure. My colleague Marco will talk about these different approaches in a minute. So it's good to start with what you have And very likely, you will start with a monitoring system that is rather incomplete. You will probably be able to check, for example, if actions have been completed or not, and also what direct outputs could be achieved. But maybe you have only limited information on the outcomes of these actions and probably no information at all on the overarching impacts. But still, this is good to start with. And if you take a systematic look at it, you can identify what you actually measure and be transparent about it. And you can also see which areas you can try working on to get data in the future. And finally, monitoring also involves targets. And this is of utmost importance because there's no direction without targets. My colleague Marco will talk about this now, and I'm happy to hand over to him. Thank you.
Thank you, Yannis, and good morning, all. My name is Marco Bianchi, and as Yannis, I belong to the Coordination and Support Office within the CCRI, and I've been mostly engaged with the development of the CCRI methodology guidance document that I hope that you all you are already familiar with. But let's go with order. Next slide, please. So, as you know, we developed during the last year this document that we hope might be useful for decision and policymaker, and we try to collect the best state-of-art experience on creating and implementing circular system solution at the local level, at the urban or regional level. So today I will specifically tell you where you can find information on monitoring and evaluation of circular systems, systemic solution within this document. Next slide, please. So within the CCRI methodology, which is structured in three different big areas, the mapping phase, design phase, and the implementation phase, we have several steps or sections which tackle specifically the monitoring. This is the step 1.2 within the mapping phase, which refer to the baseline and the KPI that should be considered when assessing the circularity of a region. Then within the design phase, we have the step 2.3 and 2.4, where we took a closer look to the circular systemic solution, and we explain how to deal with the evaluation of impacts of this solution. And finally, the step 3.2, which occurs during the implementation phase, in which we provide guidance on the importance, as Yannis was saying before, on monitoring the evolution of the circular system solution implemented in order to take corrective action. Now, in a nutshell, I will explain these three steps. Next slide, please. So, during the mapping phase, we have seen that as Yannis, and we will see also later on with the case study, the collection or the availability of data is the most important barrier. And the suggestion is here to start with what you have. If these are just the estimate based on national statistic, this is fair to start with, and above all to start identifying prioritization area. Okay. So during this phase, which is kind of exploratory phase, the idea is to identify those intervention area which make sense for the region. And for this, as I said before, starting with the national statistics and then adapting this data to the regional context based on complementary data as economic structure or population and so on is it's enough. The idea, so it is to identify trends and hotspot and then prioritize intervention area. Prioritization is not only depend on the circularity potential, but also on the resources available for municipalities, and obviously the willingness to achieve certain results, and then the availability of an interest of it. Next slide, please. Then once that the intervention area are defined and the circular systemic solution is put in motion, it is important to analyze the impact of this circular systemic solution. In this case, it is important to not only rely on national statistics, because at the last you would perform the performance of the nation instead of the region. So in this phase, it is very important that you use local data. And do not stop to analyzing circularity as such, because at the last, circular systemic solution goals is to increase social welfare, for example, or reduce environmental degradation. So for this, it is very important that you include, or at least consider, indicator referring to these areas, so economic impacts or social well-being, because as I said, circularity or recycling for themselves do not necessarily imply an improvement on the status quo. Next slide, please. Then the last phase in the CCRI methodology refer to the implementation, and in this case, regarding to the monitoring framework, to the monitoring of the evolution of the circular systemic solution. And as Yannis said before, this is important for steering social support, but also to communicate results to other cities that might be interested in taking similar or replicating your circular systemic solution. And keep in mind that what cannot be measured then cannot be evaluated. So it is very important to select specific indicator related to decision-making area. And for this, the consideration of the SMART framework, which we will see in a while, might be useful. Last but not least, when setting up a monitoring scheme, it is important also to setting the time frame and targets in order to see whether in order to be able to evaluate the performance. So do not just identify KPI, but also establish with the stakeholder some goals to be achieved within a reasonable time frame. Next slide, please. So within the CCRI methodology, specifically within the first stage, the definition of the baseline, we provide in the CCRI, in the document, some example of indicator. These were retrieved from existing experience. As an example, the OECD Circular City report, but also from the Urban Agenda Partnership Initiative and several ESPON or European projects. So we reviewed all these indicators and we did a proposal in the document of KPI according to the four thematic area which are promoted within the European Union monitoring framework. And we made a distinction between basic indicators, so those indicators that should be available at the local level, or at least can be estimated with reasonable efforts. And then for those cities and regions which are at the kind of most advanced level, we also proposed some more complex indicator, which might be addressed. This might be the circularity rate or the material footprint and so on. On top of the four thematic areas which are aligned with the European Union monitoring scheme, we also included an additional one which relate to the governance. And in this, we were inspired by the OECD work, which take a closer look on the governance of the circular economy. So these include indicator on action implemented, on the policy related existing in the territory, or the awareness campaign launched within the region. Next slide, please. Then going forward in the design phase, as I said before, we propose the use of the SMART framework. So when defining your monitoring scheme, uh, please keep in mind that the indicator should be, first of all, specific. So for each indicator, you need to be sure about what decision-making area is referring to. Then it has to be measurable, so and replicable over time. Achievable by this, it means that it needs to be cost effective in order to be measured, and relevant. So it has to be close to the outcome that we want to achieve. That's why I was referring to before to the goal and the ambition that we need to set. And finally, it should be timely. And this refers to the time frame that I was saying before, but also that it has to be measured in a timely way. For example, once a year, or once every 2 years. Then the indicator can also be categorized in different by nature. For example, in the CCRI methodology, we distinguish between output, which are those indicators informing on the action that are foreseen. This might be, for example, the creation of a stakeholder platform, the launch of an awareness campaign, or the creation of a stakeholder group, or the installation of a plant, for example. Then there are the outcome KPI, which refer to the waste or material flows. So in this case might be related to the reduction of waste, increase of recycling, or reduction in consumption of material, and so on. And finally, KPI relating to the impact. This, by impact, we mean those aspects that need some estimation or some ancillary method to be calculated, such as emission, for example, or footprint, and so on. This is, I think this is all from my side. As you know, since I have 2 minutes left, we will update the CCRI methodology during the year. We foresee an update by the end of the year. So any suggestions in this aspect of monitoring and the KPI indicator is very welcome. We were thinking indeed in the next version of the CCRI to provide next to the indicator some benchmarking. So for example, the European average for recycling, or the European average for waste generation, because we thought that it might be useful for the decision maker to have kind of value to compare their performance and somehow to prioritize one or the other area. It would be very useful for us if you can provide your feedback also here directly in the chat on whether providing this benchmark value next to the indicator might be useful for you. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the rest of the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marco. You can also write your question in the chat maybe so that people can answer that directly. Now we are slowly turning to more practical side. Tim will give us a sneak peek of the self-assessment tool, which is being developed as we speak, and it's the first time it's been presented to an audience. I think I'm right. So floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Tuksha, and good morning to everyone. If we please move to the first slide, I'm happy to show you the work we have done in the past month and what we're currently developing and soon are testing, the CCRI self-assessment tool. What is the goal of the tool? We have said that we want to provide a monitoring system for the implementation of circular systemic solutions and transfer relevant data knowledge. And we want to do that with the defined scope of the self-assessment tool. That is to enable the user to select relevant indicators and to measure the progress towards circularity, to visualize the data that is inserted, and all of that is supposed to support the decision making. So if we move to the next slide, a brief note about the structure of the tool. So basically, we have 5 steps along the procedure. We are starting with the mapping of the regional circular economy and its context. We then move to step number 2, where we assess the strategy of the implementation. So we have a stronger focus on the actions that have been taken and whether they are appropriate. And then we come to step number 3, where we define the framework for specific targets and the reporting system. And all of these 3 steps are then summarized in step number 4, where we show the results on a comprehensive dashboard. And last but not least, we have step number 5, where we give some additional guidance on the data collection. So if we move to the next slide, please, we go into a bit more of a detail. And starting with module number 1. So we have the mapping of the regional circular economy and its context. So we want to understand the surrounding conditions for the circular systemic solution. And here, the user starts with the assessment of 4 context dimensions that we have defined. First of all, some general information. So for example, the overall economic composition on the local level. Then we have some qualitative descriptions. So for example, are there specific impact targets or goals that can be described? And then we focus on policies and actors that are relevant to the circular systemic solution and might have a significant impact on it. If we go to the next slide, we look at module number 2. We now assess the strategy of implementation. So we focus on the actions, and here the user rates the appropriateness of those implementation actions. And we use the OECD governance framework, a well-established framework that consists of 9 different governance dimensions, where for each of them, the user can place a qualitative rating to evaluate the status. Click please, and we can zoom into our tool. Yes, thank you. And you can see here on the very left side, the 9 categories of the OECD framework. So on the first place, you see the category of appropriate scale, but you also see categories such as coordination or innovation actions or actions related to the strategic vision of the circular systemic solution. And in the table, you can now see that for each of these categories, we provide several sub-criteria. And for each of these criteria, user will now have to place a rating on the actions on a scale from 1 to 6. 1 being actions are being planned, and 6 meaning actions are in place and all objectives have been achieved. And this assessment is to be done in a repetitive way, so year by year, so that over time the progress across the different categories or the different criteria becomes visible. Moving to the next module of our tool, we look at module number 3 and the definition of the framework for specific targets and the reporting system. And you could say this is sort of the heart of the tool, where now the user is supposed to select indicators relevant to the circularity strategy, and the user has to insert the available data. And here we differentiate. We have on the one hand side output indicators, and on the other hand side outcome indicators, which are then subdivided in 4 categories of production and consumption, waste management, secondary raw materials, and the 4th being competitiveness and innovation. Next slide, please. We can again move into our self-assessment tool. And you see here the example for outcome indicators, concretely the example of production and consumption indicators. And you can see that in step number 1, users will now have to select relevant indicators. So again, you have different categories. On the very left side, you see energy, you can see greenhouse gases, material flow analysis, as well as waste generation. And in the table, you can then see that for each category, we provide the different indicators with a concrete description, as well as the commonly used unit for it. And you see in the middle, the column of called relevance, where now the user is deciding whether the indicator is taken into account or not. And depending on that, user goes to the next step, step number 2, where now targets are being defined, which is of course dependent on whether you already have data or not. If you do, for each of these pre-selected indicators, we ask the user to insert the base level. So where are you today? And the target level. Where do you want to go within the future and over what period of time? If no data is available for the selected indicator, we give some additional guidance. We have some direct linkages to national data that can be used and disaggregated to the local or municipal level as a first estimate, but then clearly needs to be further elaborated, which we will come back to later on in the procedure. But once that procedure has been gone through, here as well, the base level would need to be inserted, the target level and the periods within those targets is to be reached. And then step number 3 would be to insert the values, insert the data that is being collected over time for the defined years. Next slide, please. And all of this data and the selected indicators will now be summarized in the 4th step, summary and the comprehensive dashboard that we provide. So here the user can dynamically visualize all the data selected, all the indicators selected and the indicators selected and the data inserted. And we provide 2 different dashboards. We have on the one hand side a general comprehensive dashboard showing all the data, and we have a progress dashboard where we compare the data that has been inserted to the target path so that the user can see whether the progress within, for example, the first years is sufficient enough to reach the target that has been set. If we go to the next slide, we can zoom in again so you have an idea of what this dashboard will look like. You can see the different categories across the different modules. And now basically the user has the chance to switch between the different indicators and visualize the data over time. Next slide, please. and we go to the last step of our self-assessment tool, where we provide some additional guidance on data collection. So here, the user receives some more information, and the user can derive follow-up actions from that. So for example, if you have seen in module number 3, you have selected some indicators, but you do not yet have data on it, and the disaggregated national data is not sufficient enough, you might come to this additional guidance. We provide some more methodology, for example, on how to collect waste statistics. And we also provide a long list of indicators, so even more indicators you might want to have a look at, which you're free to add to your tool if you consider them to be relevant. So that was a very brief and very quick overview of the work we have done, and I will hand back to Tuksha.
Thank you very much. We have a quick question. When will be the first version of the tool available? I don't know if you can answer this at this stage, but if you have an estimation, it will be helpful.
So currently we have developed this is the first beta version, which we are now soon going to be testing with some of the pilots. And then progress from that, we will, of course, insert all the feedback we get, and we develop the tool further. I'm not sure about the specific date. Maybe Janis knows more about that, but it will still take some time.
Okay, and also I think it's important to emphasize that it will be refined with user feedback, which is very important.
Exactly.
We have some specific questions on the tool. I suggest you answer to them directly in the chat because it's very concise, so we don't spend much time on it during the talking session. Thank you very much, Tim. It was quite interesting. I hope it will be useful for use. Okay, so now we are moving to the more practical side, as we promised. Our first guest is Kristen from Møre and Romsdal, Norway. She will tell us about how they measure the progress towards sustainable development goals at local level. And there's something interesting here because they're working on a harmonization process across the municipalities for methods and calculating and all this. So I'm very curious to hear, Kristen, please, the floor is yours, and thank you very much again.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so my name is Kristin and I work in the county of Møre and Romsdal as a project manager for the sustainability region Møre and Romsdal. Through this project, we have done quite extensive work with data collection and monitoring at the local and regional level, specifically in regards to the UN SDGs. So I've been invited to tell you a bit about how we organize data collection across 26 municipalities using a shared methodology, and reflect on some of the positive effects of that and also some of the challenges we faced and the next steps in the project. So a bit of context before we start. Møre og Romsdal is a region on the northwestern coast of Norway. It's one of the smallest counties in Norway with a total population of 265,000 inhabitants. And it's quite rural. We have 26 municipalities with between 2 to 60,000 inhabitants. Yeah, next slide, please. The Sustainability Region project was launched in 2020, and to start the project, we wanted to do a joint mapping of SDG status at the local level, because that was very important to us to have the data on the local level for the municipalities. All the municipalities joined the project and agreed to use the same methodology. It was a standardized methodology developed by the UN-based initiative United for Smart Sustainable Cities, U4SSC. And this was because the 3 biggest municipalities in the county had already started using this methodology, and therefore we wanted to coordinate a shared mapping with all 26 municipalities. So the county coordinated the work and provided support for the municipalities. We had one key resource in each municipality that was our contact person, and we had shared digital working spaces through Teams to do this, and also regular meetings with all municipalities during the data collection, so that questions one municipality had could be raised with everyone, and we could help each other. Having the county coordinate the initiative and provide support was key. Most of the municipalities would not have been able to do this by themselves because of resources and competence. Next slide, please. So in regards to some pros and cons of doing a joint data collection and using a shared methodology, there are obviously some very positive aspects of it. Since we did it together, we could share resources, the municipalities could share resources and help each other with the data collection. We sort of became a team across all 26 municipalities with help from the county. Also, using the same methodology provided us a shared databases and a standard across all municipalities in the region. So we had the same baseline when we discussed sustainability and the SDGs. And that again provides a basis for joint regional initiatives and projects after the data analysis. So based on the analysis we made, we have identified 6 main areas that we are working with right now. Of course, there's some challenges as well with doing a joint data collection and using the same methodology. The municipalities had varied resources to follow up the project, so it took quite some time to finish with everyone, and some of the municipalities that were quite quick had to wait for some of the others to finish. So that sort of made the process a bit longer, but it was worth it, we think. And using a shared methodology, there's the problem, of course, that not all indicators are relevant for all municipalities because there is no indicator set that is perfect for everyone at once. But we still saw it valuable to have a shared baseline and then rather based on that, start developing individual adjustments. So next slide, please, because that's what we're doing now. The U4CC data collection was a pilot for us, and we are continually working to provide our municipalities with the best tools for data monitoring and data collection. And in that regard, the next step now for us is to learn how to use the taxonomy developed by the Norwegian Association for Local and Regional Authorities, KS, and Statistics Norway. And they have made a taxonomy for sorting and classifying indicators in relation to the SDGs. The taxonomy is a tool that helps us better understand what we are actually measuring, for example, in relation to the SDGs, in relation to a triple bottom line, evaluation criteria, that's been discussed a bit earlier today as already. Are we measuring input, outcome, impact? It's important to know what we're measuring. And also data quality. So to be clear, this taxonomy does not provide a recommended set of indicators to use for monitoring SDG progress, but it is a tool that helps us understand what we are currently monitoring and measuring. And once we know that, it can help us be more strategic about how and what we monitor. And I think it can be used for much more than SDG monitoring because many of the parameters that are in the taxonomy aren't related specifically to the SDGs, but yeah, data quality, evaluation criteria, development sector. So I think it's a useful tool for much more than just SDG measuring. Next slide, please. So how will this be of use for us in the next step? First of all, it gives us a better understanding of what we are already monitoring. We have used the taxonomy to look at the U4SSE indicators to just understand even better what those provide us with, and then also identify the areas that need better indicators or monitoring. And the way I understand the taxonomy or see it, it's a bit of a set of filters or lenses that you can help find you the right indicators for a specific purpose or context and need. Next slide, please. So we hope that the combination of using a shared methodology as a basis, the U4CC data collection, and supplementing it then with tools like the taxonomy, that makes it easier to make individual adjustments that will provide us with a good way of monitoring progress. We will have a shared basis, but still can make the individual adjustments that are necessary in each of the municipalities. We haven't started using the taxonomy yet. We're going to have a huge workshop with all our municipalities next week. So we're eager to see how that goes, and we'll be happy to share more when we've done that. Yeah. Thank you very much. I think that's my last slide. Yeah, we have an English report actually on the data collection and the whole methodology with doing it with the whole region. So that's available for everyone. And the taxonomy is also available in English. So I can put it in the chat maybe.
Thank you very much. This is very impressive, and your timekeeping is also very impressive. So I thank you for that too. There was a question, maybe I can quickly ask. So you mentioned the workshop.
Yeah.
Does it take much training for the local authorities, people who will actually sit on the desk to use this framework? Do you think it will be challenging in terms of skills?
No, not necessarily. It's a bit about understanding what the taxonomy does and does not do. I think that has been the biggest challenge so far, but it has been tested already with the 10 biggest municipalities in Norway. There was a workshop before Christmas where they used it. And I think working together, you can actually use it quite easily, but it's a bit of work, of course. And then we'll see next week how it works. Yeah, excited to see how it goes.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. So we are continuing with the next, also big picture. Sophie from Berlin, Senate Department for the Environment, Urban Mobility, Consumer Protection, Climate Action, is going to tell us how they are working in Berlin to monitor climate and environmental balance of the territory, which is, again, a very nice concept. Please, Sophie, floor is yours. Thank you very much. You're muted.
Good morning. I don't see my presentation yet.
I see it.
Thank you.
Very good.
Now I see it. Yeah, good morning, everybody. I was invited here as Berlin has a quite advanced data collection system for monitoring the waste industry since 2010, and this is what I'm going to present you. Unfortunately, our report is only in German. You see the picture of it on the left. So I hope I can introduce you to it today. Next slide, please. So the system is in place since 2010, and we have this extended balance every other year. Since the beginning, it has been an external call for tenders, and we use a method where the waste quantity is given, and we only compare the environmental benefits or burdens per ton of waste to compare different treatments, treatment plants, and wastes. In total, we have 37 non-hazard waste types, where the data is partially public, partially private, as well as the treatment. So public could be sewage, sludge, and private mineral waste, for example. We look at them in 3 perspectives: material flow, climate footprint, and 9 indicators for the environmental footprint. Next slide, please. This is an exemplary fact sheet as we have it for every of the 37 waste streams. It starts in red with the mass balance, the material flow. In blue, you see the climate footprint, and in brown, the environmental footprint. You see that there are like 2 bars of separation for the protected interests we have. We focused on 3. It's the resource conservation, air emissions, and pollutant input into soil. And these are underfed with several indicators. Next slide, please. So how do we monitor the progress? we have certain goals as the country of Berlin decided to set itself. And we compare the data in comparison to those goals. And we compared the waste between the waste types, between the years, and between the treatment plans. For example, in the waste types, we look at the quantity, which waste stream had the biggest quantity. It was soil and stones. And then we look at the different output rates, household waste has a very low recycling rate, for example, and we see paper waste has a very high recycling rate, and we can compare it in table. We look at the climate footprints and how they differ among the waste types and the environmental footprints. When we compare between the wastes, between the years, we compare since 2010, but only for the simpler indicators like waste quantities and the climate footprint. For the environmental footprint, we have too many indicators, so we only compare with the previous report. Then we also compare between treatment plants. I won't get into detail, but for example, we have organic waste, and we look which biogas plant is more efficient than the other. Next slide, please. The challenges we had is that the report is very long. It has 123 pages. Even the short version is almost 40 pages. The summary 10 pages. So it's rather a document where you look things up than you read it through. It's very human resource intensive. Several people work on it, but in total it's like a full-time equivalent of a master degree person. It's very complex. It requires time to understand. Academic background is very beneficial. So there's very distribution of the insights and very few companies who offer it. And the data availability is also a problem because we depend on the goodwill of the companies, especially for the private data. Next. So what is missing? We have very little data on waste prevention, very little on reuse, and we sometimes lack a few overviews. Thank you very much. I will end with this slide, and happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much. Very good. There was a question on whether you have information on reuse or social dimensions of circular economy, but I think you answered this with saying that there is limited information there. I don't know if you want to add some things to this.
I could add. On the slide, there was written that we have estimates for textiles and for electronic goods. For textiles, we made a special study where we asked the biggest firms in Berlin that resell used textiles and also who export. There are also some limits because we don't know how the after the reuse, the textiles are treated when they become waste afterwards. But that were the first waste streams where we dipped into that.
It's very good start. Anyway, it's very interesting. Thank you very much, Sophie. So we are moving on now to Belgium, Flanders. We have Elmar from Circle of Flanders and Chris from Flanders Waste Agency together. They will tell us about the work of circular monitoring in the region, which I think it's an early example, but also about this digital system that they're working on to overcome some of these challenges that was mentioned earlier. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. I'm glad to have you all together, like more than 170 people. That's great. Just a short introduction of what we're doing and what would like to do in Flanders when it comes to circular economy monitoring, waste monitoring, with a specific interest in the role of cities. Next slide, please. We have to go quite quickly, but this is our main ambition. We want to be a front runner in the circular economy as a small but very important region in Europe. We think We want to decouple our material footprint from consumption by 2030. We want a reduction, an effective reduction, an absolute reduction of 30% towards 2030 already. So it's only 7-8 years from now, which will be a hard task. And this can only be done in a public-private effort, of course, in a partnership across society, across people and industry. That's what we need to do. So this is just a short vision that I'll present and not go into detail at this moment. Next slide, please. So I myself am really much engaged with circular cities and the role of local authorities. What can they do? What is their capacity? What is their willingness? And what are their projects? And I noticed that there are a lot of challenges on jobs, economy, open space, social inequalities, mobility, infrastructure. And we really believe, and we have seen some proof, that circular economy is actually a catalyst for the welfare and well-being of a city. It can really contribute to the local economy. It can really contribute to climate and sustainability goals. It improves social cohesion and social equality. So this is what we are seeing. This is happening, but at the same time, you have to prove it, and you have to make it clear to everyone that everybody is doing their part. Next slide, please. And that's why, of course, we need a monitoring, and we need numbers and figures, and we need to spell out what's possible. And we do it well. Traditionally, we focus on waste figures, waste numbers that tell something about the material footprint of a city. And we have actually quite like most of European member states and cities, we have an advanced system to collect data on the kilograms of household waste that is produced, the waste that is selectively collected, the waste that is material recovered or that is recovered by energy and incineration. So we are working towards the goal of 100 kilograms residual waste per inhabitant in 2030. And this will be supported as well by a new information system that Chris will tell us a bit more about.
Yes, on the next slide, you see, so for a monitoring system, you need to have an evaluation of your goal achievement, but also the appropriate data is really crucial in organizing and in getting the circular economy going, and that's what why such a registration of data and getting the data in a true data system is very crucial. And in the Flemish region, we have now started this MATIS, this material information system to register data and data on both the collection, transport, and also the processing and the recycling of material streams, of waste streams. So that method and that information system is now being deployed. So it's a huge system for the whole region, and it's in development. Once it's deployed, you need to manage it all the time. So next slide shows that actually there's many actors involved. You have the collection systems, you have the transporting, you have the processing, and so there's for each waste stream, so bio-waste, plastics, etc. You need to have specific data layers. You need to really think about what data you need, and it has to be very specific. You need the dates, you need the quantities, you need the quality aspects, and all of that you have to bring in a central system, because if you want really to monitor, if you really want elements on circular economy at the regional scale, you have to have all that data available and at hand in a managed system. So the next slide shows a bit the complexity of it. For instance, just for the household waste collection, in certain communities, in certain cities, it's done by a public rounds for collecting waste. In others, it's done privately, and so you need different data protocols, data management for these different flows. And so each of these aspects of data gathering in the monitoring system has its own protocols, has its own data layers, and has its final outcome and resulting in the system. So that's just to present you the complexity of it when you scale up to a regional level. But the system is in development now. It's already in use, and so if people want information on it, there's already some reporting on it on our website. So
yes, and it will definitely help to actually monitor the flows of the production of waste until the right processing types and across the region and beyond. Of course, we really need to have those data, and we will have that. It's being developed. Next slide, please. So let's have a look at a more general with a more general perspective to the state of circular economy in Flanders. We have developed, and I would like to invite you to go to the cemonitor.be to explore the more than 140 indicators on the circular economy in Flanders. And we actually chose to have a meso level approach in this story. We have some macro figures about the state of the economy in Flanders. Next slide, please. But we also have we try to have as much micro level indicators as possible, micro level indicators concerning products or companies and individual performances of products and material flows. But we want, and we also have well, the more macro level indicators, you know, having a broad perspective of the level of circularity in Flanders, just like the Circularity Gap Report does, or other research institutes. But we want to have a more refined meso level approach indicator system. So we chose actually 4 need fulfillment systems concerning mobility, housing, which is crucial, nutrition, food, and finally also consumer goods, which is not on this table. These clusters or these groups, we think are important to measure and to monitor, and it's been published, it has been researched, and we now have different you know, indicators for all of those subsystems on mobility, housing, nutrition, food, and consumer goods. Next slide, please. So this is the general view of what comes in and what goes out. It indicates that we have only well, already a cyclical material rate of about 20% in Flanders, but of course there's a lot of environmental burdens and material specific material indicators that are not included here. This is just a general picture, and now we want to bring it back to the level of cities and regions, and also connect it to the 4 subsystems that I've just explained: mobility, housing, food, and consumer goods. Next slide, please. Yeah, so we need, yes, next, there's another sentence. Yes, we need to explore and to work on the potential of monitoring circular economy in a city context. We need more data, we need more refined methodology. Next slide, please. And we have seen some very nice initiatives based on macro data. You know, Gambet World is exploring and is providing indications about the material footprint of cities already. It's already available in a beta version, and it really, those visuals really show you know, what's the material footprint and what's the emissions connected with that, and if you are actually you know, transgressing a boundary or not, the overshoot. Is there an overshoot? For example, the Mechelen, the city where we live, is there is an overshoot. So this is an indication of what is happening in your city. Next slide. And this is more already done on the level of the built environment, mobility, food, and consumer goods. We didn't do it, but it's connected to the things that we would like to have in Flanders in the future with reliable data. But these are not bottom-up data. This is top-down data that is being transposed and being adapted to the city level. And the city level, it's meant the number of inhabitants, the number of and the size of the economy, and on that basis there is an allocation of these kilotons and material flows. Next slide, please. So we see that there is a positive ecological effect. We also see that it has economic effects, but what I just want to prove is that these numbers are really based on top-down figures, and it's also consultancy-based. It's not public available methodology that can be applied anywhere, and that's the whole point. Next slide, please. So we see that it has economic benefits. We notice it has been calculated on behalf of certain cities, but it's not available for every city, or just like with waste statistics. Next slide, please. Next. There's job growth. Companies are really more resilient when they apply circular strategies. We have this data, but it's really ad hoc, so to say. Next one. Next one. Yes. Just to end, as I've said, there's no comparison possible between cities at this point. It's rather consultancy based. It's fragmented. We have data on waste. It's generally available. And but how can we obtain data on material flows, and how can we make it a real monitoring system that really goes into the material footprint of cities of a region concerning housing, food, mobility, and consumer goods. So this is the next challenge that we want to tackle within the CCRI-CSO project. And this will be a collaboration with KU Leuven. And we hope that this will continue to be financed because we really want our circular economy indicators on a city level working for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this another very interesting presentation. I guess it answers some of the questions also in the chat, indicating that why there is nothing about the social aspects or economic aspects of circular economy. There is some elements there we can see. Yeah. I want to move to our next presentation, and then maybe in the end we will come back to these questions. Now, we are moving to a more focused level. Alessandro Pensa from the mayor's cabinet of Capanori is going to tell us how they managed to have this extensive municipal waste data collection, because as we know, it's one of the building blocks of what we just talked about. And also very important, I want to say, maybe he won't mention it, this information is available online, so you can consult it. You can see the statistics over 20 waste streams, which is very important, and we don't really mention it enough, I think. So thank you very much, Alessandro. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. Okay, yeah. This is really a short case presentation, very practical, about how we measure and monitor our waste stream from urban waste collection. And so how we moved from just an issue of traceability to a more issue of resources management. So next slide, please. So, okay, Capanori is a municipality located in Italy, north of Tuscany, with 46,000 inhabitants. And just we adopted a door-to-door waste collection plus a pay-as-you-throw tariff, and we reached 86% of separate collection this is from last year. And we are also a zero waste certificated city since our municipality adopted a zero waste strategy. It was like 15 years ago, 20 years ago. So next, please. So the actors involved in this system are basically three actors: municipality, waste management company, which is a public company owned by and controlled by the municipality, which is called ASHIT. And then we have also a collaboration with the Zero Waste Research Center, which is basically a municipality collaboration group of experts and civil society that are engaged in promoting good practices for zero waste. So this by the collaboration of these three actors, we implemented this system. Next, please. Okay, these are the flows of material we measure in Capannary from our door-to-door urban collection. 21 type of materials we collect and we weight, and we elaborated a monthly report with this 21 type of materials. We have also another two type of materials that are not included in this one. We weight separately, which are waste from demolition works, small demolition works, and waste from street sweeping. But these are basically the most important flow. Next, please. So this is the composition of our in percentage of our waste from domestic collection in Capannary. So you see, we have a lot of organic waste, a lot of paper and cardboard. You see here a small quantity of textile, which is not real because this data is referred to 2021, but we started a separate collection of textile starting from last October. So we don't have yet consolidated data about textile. So you see now in this graphic, textile are included in not recyclable. Next, please. So as I told you, the first issue was a traceability issue. So we wanted to trace our waste flows from the door of every citizen to the recycling or disposal places. So how we do that? We collect waste from door to door, and the operator weight the waste inside 5 recycling centers we have in Capannary. So what we need is basically a certificated scales, an hardware and software, and to have a training for the operators to monitor and measure all the waste flows. Next, please. Then what we do is a monthly report in which we indicate the type of material, the weight, and the difference with the previous years. So you see in the picture a monthly report which is not published. It's just an internal report between the actors involved in the system. Next, please. Then what is published is every year all data collected from municipalities in Tuscany are sent to the regional authority for resources, which is basically a regional under regional authority of Tuscany. And every year we have a certificated data published on the internet site. Next, please. So next important word is value, traceability, but then value, because knowing what's inside our the waste bags from citizen, it's our priority. It's always been our priority for many reasons. When we decided to move to a door-to-door collection and pay-as-you-throw tariff, it's important that citizens are aware that they have a value inside their houses. So this is we calculate how valuable are materials collected in Capanari, which is right now the 10% of the waste management company budget, which is between 8 and 900,000 revenue. And the materials with the higher value are those material, so vegetable oils, batteries, metal, e-waste, glass, and paper. Next, please. So as someone also who was speaking maybe from Berlin was saying, it's all traceability, value, and it's also a matter of quality. It's important that apart from the waste and monitoring the trend of this percentage in different material flow, we want to be sure that what's inside is material of good quality, because if we have a good quality, revenues are higher. So on the other side, if the material contains some impurities, it may be difficult to sell them. So how we manage this issue? We started to make a periodic control activity, sampling waste bags coming from urban collection. So this is what we do. Once a year, we control paper. 4 times a year we control glass. 4 times a month we control plastic. When we found out that we found some impurities that goes higher a certain percentage, we started to divide bags in the recycling center. We start to divide bags according to the different zone of collection inside the territory, and we just to see if this impurity presence is overspread all the territory, or if we notice that these impurity are localized in a certain area, we can reach those citizens and have more accurate collection. Next, please. And the role of Zero Waste Research Center. Actually, the monitoring and the activity of sampling the bags to monitor quality is managed by the waste management company, and the Zero Waste Research Center also have an important role in seeing what's inside the non-recyclable bag. Please, next. So what they do actually is, next please, is they go to the recycling center, they open the bag, and they have these three circles method. So they divide the non-recyclable, what they find inside the non-recyclable bag into three types of material: the error of separation, the collection error, and the design error. So for every error, they find a solution. So more awareness for citizen, more reuse facilities, or better separate collection. And for the design error, a better design, asking the producer to rethink the design of a product. Next, please. Next. And so what we have inside now in Capanori, as you can see, it's basically nappies, textile, which are the two material now that represent a challenge for us in Capanori. Next, please. Apart from these two types of material, another challenge is to measure a reuse system we have in Capanori, and to know the value of reuse, which is another challenge. Next, please. So what we try to always have in mind and is that a lot of the products that go to landfill are still reaching value. So what we have to do is just have a good management to avoid this lose of value. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alessandro. There are some questions, but we'll come to it after our last presentation. So last but not the least, Gisela from Catalan Waste Agency is going to talk about the industrial waste streams, which is kind of a black hole of the waste data. So I'm curious, how did you manage to put that in place? Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm Gisela Sommer. I'm representing today the Waste Agency of Catalonia. Catalonia is an autonomous community of Spain. And the Waste Agency is the competent authority of Catalonia for anything to do with planning, controlling, and legislation on waste. So I will present you the very basic features. No, not so fast. Sorry. The very basic features of monitoring industrial waste in Catalonia. Now, the next slide, please. The legal basis is the Catalan law from 1993 on waste, which set the ground rules for waste management, which were further developed by the decree on waste management procedures from 1999. And let's start with the first stakeholder within the waste management activities in Catalonia, which are the waste management activities. In Catalonia, we have at present registered about 1,000 waste management activities or enterprises. And these are, amongst many other obligations, they have to register in the Register of Waste Management, where they obtain an identification code that has to be applied in any documentation and communication they issue. And they have to submit the annual waste declaration in the Catalan acronyms DARIC, Declaració Anual de Residus Industrials. And in these declarations, they have to state their waste inputs classified by the European Waste Code, treatment operations they apply to these wastes, and the outputs of the wastes and products if they obtain them, as well as their destination. And this has to be very specific information given on them. So next slide, please. On the other hand, we have the waste producers. The Catalan industry comprises mostly small and medium-sized enterprises. And we have at present around 20,000 industrial waste producers, which have the obligation to sign up in the register of industrial waste producers and obtain their identification code. And they also have to submit an annual declaration of waste. It is very similar to the previous declaration, but they have to describe their processes, the production processes, the raw materials involved, and the products obtained. They have to give information on the waste produced, to which waste management facilities these wastes in any case are brought, and what treatment they undergo. Thank you. Next slide, please. Last year, the Spanish government issued the new law on waste and contaminated soil for a circular economy, in which it extended reporting obligations also to agents and brokers of hazardous waste and to haulers or carriers of hazardous waste. Next slide, please. In Catalonia, we started in 2002 an online waste documentation system, which is compulsory for any stakeholders in industrial waste management. It has to be used for registration, for documentation, and for the declaration, but it is also a tool for consultation. Next slide, please. And from the data we obtain by this tool, we can set up our annual waste statistics of industrial wastes. Here we have, for example, the total waste in generation in 2021 by industrial sector, which generates these wastes. Next slide. We can draw up from the detail of data also the statistics on which waste goes to which treatment, for example, recovery or disposal, and within that different treatment options. Next slide, please. We can draw up maps on waste generation. This is, for example, the left one is the map of the Catalan counties, 41 counties, and I choose as example the waste code 15, waste packaging, absorbents, and wiping cloth generation by a county. On the right hand, we have the total industrial waste generation by county. Next slide, please. And we can draw up time series. Here, for example, we have the evolution of industrial waste generation and the specific treatments in the province of Barcelona. If you are interested in more details on our waste statistics, here you have the links to our statistics site. Next slide, please. Now I come to the challenges. First of all, the implementation takes a lot of time and effort. We are working for more than 20 years in developing and updating and extending the waste management, the reporting system that we have set up. The system must be robust and flexible, because otherwise you cannot answer immediately to change the legislation or data requirements. The confidentiality of production data must be guaranteed. Otherwise, you won't get anybody to report the data. And of utmost importance is the maintenance of registers and the control of the data quality that are the input to that system, because they are the basis for the traceability of industrial wastes. In order to set up mass balances, and that is the cornerstone for an industry for the circular economy. So I think I made my 5 minutes. Thank you very much. If you have any question, fire away.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. We have heard a lot. I think it's quite intense to hear all these things all at once, but I suggest everyone also maybe can rewatch the webinar at some point, so to remind yourselves. We have a couple of questions. Overall, I would like to clarify one thing. All of the tools developed by CCRI-CSO are publicly available, but will be publicly available and free of charge. And no, you don't have to use them to apply to specific funding. So they are not mandatory to use, but they are there to help you in your journey. Another question to Tim and Yannis, maybe also to others if you want to answer. Can we use the tool, the question, with any CSS, or is there a predefined list of examples? Now, it's sometimes difficult to understand the question from the writing, but I guess what is meant is, can we put in any CSS or data, or do we have to select some examples? I hope it's clear.
Yannis, I'm gonna go, I think. Yes, so it's open for all CSS. There's no pre-restriction, and of course we will provide some support on for those that are looking for defining such a circular systemic solution. Yes, but the tool itself is open for all.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Another question is, can we does the tool look at secondary raw materials? Can we also, integrate this use of secondary raw materials in it?
Yes, we do. We have one section in the third module where we talk about all those indicators related to secondary raw materials. Yes.
Okay, very good. There's another general question. I don't know who would answer it. Are we looking at water and wastewater as a raw material? They are usually not thought about together with the waste, but it's of course a valuable resource. And yeah, that was one of the questions. I don't know if you or somebody else would like to answer it.
Maybe I can say something about it. So yes, this is of course one of several questions that are discussed when concepts or definitions of circular economy are discussed. So what does it cover? For example, energy topics or also water issues. Is it part of a circular economy perspective or not? So we in the self-assessment tool, we do not want to impose a certain conceptualization of circular economy on anyone. So if you define for your actions that water or wastewater is an important issue that you address, then you are also able to include this in the self-assessment. But correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, but I think in the that we suggest or that we give recommendations on, I'm not sure if there's any water-related indicator in there. But you're free to add own indicators that you have to the assessment.
Exactly. Not in the first place, but yes, we give the opportunity to add those kind of indicators. Exactly.
That's the whole point, right? It's adaptable to what you have. Very good, thank you. There is a question I think to our guest speakers overall. It was for Alessandro originally, but I think it concerns everyone. How is the cooperation between the municipal level and, for instance, the Central Statistical Institute in your countries in order to facilitate these data collection, monitoring, and processes? I don't know if Alessandro would like to answer this. Are you collaborating with ISTAT? And also for the others?
I think the regional level is the level we have more into collaboration with. There is in Italy also a national environmental research institute, which is called ISPRA, that every year publish a really important report on urban waste collection, in which you can find all data, all of data from all over Italy, and I think ISTAT is collaborating in that report. But as a municipality, we basically have our closer collaboration with regional authority agency.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to comment on this question, your collaboration with national level and also not only the Statistical Institute, but this governance level sometimes are not so clear in terms of like how do we do things, who has the responsibility, who is helping whom. So if anybody else would like to comment, you're most welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If in Catalonia, the waste agency also asked the data, the municipal data, and actually at present we are in the data campaign for the municipal data, and they also provide them via the online tool SDR that I presented earlier. So we have quite a comprehensive data collection on that one, and we also publish the statistics on our website.
Thank you. I see Sophie also with the camera on, so maybe you would like to add something?
Up to my knowledge, we don't have any cooperation with the national level about our data.
Okay, very interesting. I don't know. I mean, I know from Flanders that it's mostly very regional, but if you would like to say something on this.
Well, we collect the data regionally, but obviously we bring it to the federal, to the national level to report it to Europe and to keep the national statistics. So it's a national statistics office who collects the data from the regions and brings it in the reporting format for Europe and in some statistics. Yeah.
Okay, very good. I think I don't see any more. Well, I see many questions. We will try to follow up with these. We will also send you some links from the presenters just in case you missed that in the chat. So as like a follow-up, you can consult them, you can have a look. They are not all in English, but this is what we can do. I think this brings us to the conclusion. Thank you very much to my colleagues, but also to the guest speakers. I think without your interventions, this webinar has much less meaning. So it's very useful. And I would also like to thank the attendees and Linnea, who is technical support, and very smooth event. Thanks to you. And you will find the follow-up email and all this in the coming days. We will share some materials. If you have specific questions, please address this to us. We can relay to the speakers. We can try to help you there. And thank you very much, everyone, and have a nice lunchtime. I think it's time. Have a good day. Bye-bye. Bye.